It's August 27th, Keith, 2021. How time flies when you're having fun. How are you today?
I'm good, actually. I was born years ago today. Today's
Oh,
my
so it's your
birthday.
birthday,
It is indeed.
August the 27th.
Do you want to see what I got for my present?
Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo, I'm guessing.
What a great birthday present, eh?
Yeah, as long as you don't have to keep him in your room.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be good.
Well, it hasn't been a high energy week on the tech front, but some interesting stories. You note that money is changing. We know that money is changing. How is it changing? How do we know more about money changing this week, Keith?
Well, I chose the title fairly carefully because there's a lot of things happening that could lead to money changing theoretically. But what happened this week is that David Marcus, who's been at Facebook for the last few years, running their blockchain initiative, which was originally called Libra, and now
Until everybody pulled out, right? And then
it transformed massively. And after being quiet for the best part of a year, he wrote a lengthy piece on Medium, which was giving a status update about the initiative. And so I led with that. And his title is Good Stablecoins, a Protocol for Money and Digital Wallets, the Formula to Fix Our Broken Payment System. So it's a grandiose claim. And when you read his thing, he's very self-aware. He starts by saying there's no reason why you should believe that this is as important as I'm saying it is. So here's why I think I'm right. And he goes on at great length to talk about Facebook's 2.85 billion users, all being able to install a wallet called Novi, N-O-V-I, and use a currency called Diem, D-I-E-M, to pass money around the world to pay each other, and a little bit later on to pay merchants for stuff they buy, fully backed up by Facebook having actual assets in the bank that back up this Diem stablecoin, dollar for dollar, if you like, with real value. And he claims that it's going to kill anyone that tries to make money from being in the payments business, because Facebook's going to do all this for free.
except for Facebook, of course.
Well, he does turn his mind to, so how are we going to make money if we're going to do this for free? And his answer is that later they'll start to take from merchant transactions a small fractional percentage of the money transferred, way less than the credit card companies take, like fractions of a percent, not 2.5%. So at scale, that could be a lot of money. So they do have a plan to make money, but their initial plan is to make payments free.
Isn't it a bit annoying, though? Facebook have been doing this for years, ever since their foundation. They've always claimed they've been doing this on behalf of mankind. Zuckerberg has led on this, and it's never the case. I mean, they did the same with the free internet services in India, which got shut down because it was clear that giving away the internet for free from Facebook was essentially giving Facebook away for free. So there's got to be a trick somewhere here. When you're in the presence of Facebook people, whether it's Marcus or Zuckerberg or Sandberg, my advice is always keep your hands in your pockets. Is that fair, Keith?
I think it's very fair. I think we've seen that you can't trust private companies with what are essentially public utilities. What Facebook describes here is what sounds to me like something that should be a public utility. It shouldn't cost money to pay for things around the world. There's no reason for that to cost anything because it doesn't cost anybody anything to make it happen anymore. So that should be free. And if the world was organized according to the needs of the public, it would be free. Can you trust a private company to come in and do it for free?
Especially Facebook. Of all the companies in Silicon Valley, I think most of us would agree it's the worst, the least trustworthy, the least credible when it comes to improving the lot of mankind.
But it does lead to an interesting question, which is, in a multinational world of conflicting interests, where technology has created the possibility of public utility, how do you actually bring it into being and make it? How do you make the world as good as technology could allow it to be against all these competing interests?
Do we have any models for a successful digital public utility? I mean, Wikipedia, maybe in a way.
I can probably is close to one. It makes money by selling.
I can, yeah, but they've been compromised. Well, you know, and where they get their money and their interest. What about Wikipedia?
Wikipedia is a good example of a public utility funded by donations, which I don't think is the best model. I think the best model is the human race as a whole values something enough to invest in it existing.
What about the web? Berners-Lee's gift to mankind.
Yes, it was a public utility at the level of the code, but then the only way to implement it was for private companies to implement the code and figure out business models to do that, which has led to the currently highly centralized web of Facebook and so on, and Amazon and what have you.
And how could the web or the digital sphere mimic public space in physical life, parks, other kinds of utilities, waterworks, electricity grids?
A lot of the best thinking in this space is to do with decentralization and blockchains, allowing contributors who stake hardware and software to get rewarded for doing so. As their software and hardware gets used, they earn rewards proportionate to their contribution, and that would lead to a kind of a reward for contribution world, not a highly centralized profit goes to the biggest world. And there is some logic theoretically in that theoretically could be true. And I do think that things like Filecoin, where the company makes money insofar as you store files on its service, and all of the people like you and me who contribute hard drives to their cloud get a piece of that money. I mean, that can work. And I do think, reward earning protocols is a way to think about it. It is a viable future. But as long as you've got private companies and nation states owning the essential infrastructure of mankind, that always feels like charity or worthiness, not like the main story.
You know who you're beginning to sound like, Keith?
I'm going to guess it's not good.
Well, someone else in the newsletter today, Edward Snowden. It's not bad. Could be worse. You could be sounding like Ronaldo. What's Snowden been up to this week?
Well, so Snowden has written a piece. Well, he's now got a newsletter. For those who don't know, he has a newsletter on Substack, and he writes several times a week. And this week he wrote a long, thoughtful piece about Apple, and he kind of took on board Apple's claim that the protection of children is a sufficient reason for it to implement what it wants to implement in terms of surveillance. And he counters that with the fact that anybody who's ever tried to do surveillance always tries to claim a good cause as its purpose, but the use of the surveillance is never about that cause. It's always about lots of other things. Therefore, you can't trust Apple, even if they're well-intentioned, because you're allowing a backdoor onto your device, and you have no control whatsoever about how that backdoor gets used. We talked about this a little bit last week, and I put it in.
And it needs to be remembered, of course, that Edward Snowden is writing from Moscow as the guest, perhaps the guest of honor of Vladimir Putin's government. So it's all very well criticizing Apple, but I trust Apple a lot more than Putin when it comes to surveillance or anything else.
I don't know. Putin is pretty bold about telling you what he's doing, so I think you can pretty much trust him. It's just you might not agree with it.
Well, you don't trust his people. I mean, they're watching everyone and everything. I just did a show for my podcast on the violence around the world. Russia, I mean, Afghanistan is, of course, the most violent place in the world, but according to their metrics, Russia is the 10th most. It's not just Edward Snowden. In your Hall of Fame or Shame this week, and David Marcus. It's Cory Doctorow. We haven't heard about him or from him for a while. What's he been up to?
Yeah, so Cory Doctorow is, for those who don't know, Cory is a science fiction author, actually, and a good one.
Yeah.
But he's also a technologist and one of the founders of the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
I've crossed swords with him in the past. He's actually like a lot of these people, he's sort of quite aggressive intellectually, but when you meet him, he's a very nice person.
He's a very nice person. Yeah, I've met him as well many years ago now. But when Esther Dyson used to have her conferences in Phoenix, I met him. So this is a fairly timely piece. I think you know about this about me, Andrew, but I'm actually a bit of a data geek going back 4 decades. I cut my teeth in technology doing databases, usually for political organizations I was affiliated with, but I also wrote systems for Mobil Oil and lots of membership-based organizations, and even an accounting suite at one point. So I'm a data guy, and it's irritated me immensely over the last few years how everyone claims to be doing artificial intelligence or machine learning.
Yeah.
And that's because if you are a data geek, you know how hard it is to be good at that and how limited the functionality is in it often. So what Doctorow does here is, after doing a lot of research, he talks about how the foundations of machine learning are the quality of the data that it learns from.
Mm.
And he does a lot of case studies, one of which is on an attempt to figure out how many people double voted in elections. And he drills down into this research survey, and it turns out that due to bad data, the survey said that 90% of votes were duplicated, but the survey was more than 90% wrong. And that's because the data didn't have the date of birth for most people. And when it didn't have the date of birth, it defaulted to the 1st of January, 1971. And the machine learning took anyone with the same name and the same birth date as a single person, and therefore produced the result that there was lots of duplicate voting when in fact there wasn't any at all. And that's his example of how bad data leads to bad learning and therefore bad results and bad.
So it's the blind leading the blind. I mean, isn't that kind of obvious? Do we need Cory Doctorow to tell us this?
It's obvious, except for the fact that nobody's really asking the questions about data. It's funny that data is assumed to be good. So when a company comes and says we're doing machine learning or deep learning or labeled data, automated labeling of data, it's almost always the case that they're way worse than they claim to be.
I'll tell you something else when it comes to data. I do lots of interviews, as you know, for my other shows on now.tv and my podcasts. And whenever anyone says to me, in terms of proving their argument, the data proves it, the data shows it, by definition, they're making it up. By definition, they're wrong. So I think my anecdotal support for Cory Doctorow's argument is that anyone who actually uses the word data to support their own argument is usually, if not fraudulent, wrong. Bad data in China, Keith. Do the Chinese have bad data when it comes to investments? You've got an interesting piece this week on how China is winning the foreign investment war. Is it because they have the best data, or are they just smarter than the rest of us?
Well, the interesting thing about foreign investment, and this is about inbound investment into a country, is that you only get the investment you deserve because money is seeking money. And therefore, it tends to flow to the best opportunities to make money. And according to this survey by Visual Capitalist, which is really, really nicely designed as well as well documented, China is the growth of foreign direct investment into China exceeds that of every other country. US foreign direct investment is declining as a percentage of the world's total.
Surprise. I wonder why.
And it begs the question, how can foreign direct investment into the US be revived? I thought it was interesting because in the week where the Kabul fiasco happened, many of the commentaries in the US press are about the decline of America in the eyes of the world. And that is a political discussion. This is the economic equivalent of that political discussion. It's the decline of America as a place to invest compared to other opportunities. I think, it's intuitive that Asia is a growth story, as is India, as soon will be Africa.
Well, we're going to come on to India later. And of course, I take your point, and certainly the Chinese economy is innovative. We began with Facebook, and they're an increasingly powerful and wealthy company, amongst the most powerful and wealthiest in the world. They get a lot of criticism. Another very powerful and wealthy company, although it's part of a larger company, is YouTube. They've been in the news this week. They've done a very good job being under the radar, Keith, haven't they, in terms of the data wars and the surveillance wars. But increasingly, regulators and tech critics are looking more carefully at YouTube, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, so this is a Washington Post story originally, how America's second largest social platform ducks controversies. And the point they're making is that that YouTube is a fast follower of trends, it doesn't stick its neck out and make unpopular decisions only to reverse them later. It looks which way the wind's blowing and then goes that way. And this is about banning the Taliban, which we talked about last week, which is what Facebook did. It's kind of interesting after yesterday's events. The point we made last week that the Taliban basically is governmental and that the terrorists are its enemy and they are an enemy of the terrorists came to life yesterday as this ISIS-K group bombed Kabul airport and murdered people. And we made the point that banning the Taliban is a bit like banning a government and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Well, Facebook banned them and then YouTube followed. And this story is really about whether YouTube is going to get its own strategy separate from following others.
How do you make sense of YouTube in the broader digital economy? Back in 2006, when I was writing Cult of the Amateur, I poo-pooed Google's acquisition for $1.5 billion of YouTube, suggesting that they were radically overpaying. It was one of the many mistakes I've made.
I think
is YouTube. I mean, I think the most interesting thing to me about YouTube is their essential monopoly of online video. That's one of the struggles we have at Now TV, is figuring out a strategy independent of YouTube.
So, firstly, just to give credit where credit's due, YouTube is fabulous at doing that.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just acknowledging their dominance. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's good for them, obviously.
They're very dominant. And, I just give you an example. I recently decided I wanted to buy an espresso machine. And I went to YouTube to look at reviews. And what you find very, very quickly is, like the winner of the world latte competition or the winner of the best espresso shot competition all have YouTube channels, and they're demonstrating all the latest machines. And the quality of the information and the people presenting it is just outstanding.
Has it been integrated, though, in any way into Google? Or, no, video search is still one of the holy grails, isn't it?
Yeah, you can search for videos, but these days you use the metadata around, and YouTube has great metadata because the people publishing write stuff. Like every week when I publish our show, I write a little spiel about what's in it, and that metadata that includes your name, my name, the title of the show, the spiel about the show, that's all available through Google search. So if somebody searches for money is changing a week from now, we'll be on the list. But what they can't do yet very well, just because it would be very expensive, is to index the actual video itself. They can.
So where are they going, YouTube? Are they going after Amazon's lunch or after Hollywood's lunch, or neither?
Neither. They're really in the same space as TikTok. It's basically amateur video delivered by experts, amateur experts, i.e., not getting paid mostly.
You and I, basically, Keith.
It's a little bit like you and I, and you have to be there, right? We would be stupid not to put our show on YouTube. Why would we choose to not put it there? I do think there's a broader narrative here, which is, it's not in the newsletter, but this week, Protocol and Politico were acquired by Axel Springer.
Yeah, which was pretty interesting.
Very interesting. $1 billion apparently was the price paid. Protocol does do video, as does Politico, and the personalities from Politico and Protocol are starting to, appear in mainstream media as a form of marketing for themselves, really. But the value was in the internet audience.
How much is YouTube worth? Above 250 billion, would you say?
It's probably worth about 20% of Google's market cap, whatever that is.
Which is about 250 billion, I would guess.
Let's take a look. My computer tells me that 1.93 trillion.
Oh, so it's more, half a
trillion, about half of, yeah, 500.
So what was a better acquisition? YouTube for 1.5 bill or Instagram for $1 billion?
They were both spectacular.
Which one? One or the other, Keith? Who should we give the award for winner of the best acquisition in internet history?
I would say Instagram, because I think this was argued in Congress this week. The FTC paper that Lena Khan put out had one good point in it. And this is a little bit self-serving of me because it goes back to some article I wrote for TechCrunch at the time. I wrote an article that said it's not about Instagram, it's about mobile. And the second article I said WhatsApp is ephemeral. And what those articles were about was Facebook surviving by having a mobile strategy at a time when if you didn't, you were dead. So I think those acquisitions...
It has become the metric. I was having an argument with my daughter this week about who was more famous, the English comedian Peter Cook, the founder of logical positivism, A.J. Ayer, or Adele, the singer. The three of them, do you know what they each have in common, Keith?
And what was the question? Who is the most what?
Who is the most famous? And do you know what they all have in common?
They all have in common. No, I don't.
They are all Spurs fans.
Oh, there you go.
Three of the most famous. But my daughter's criteria was, of course, how many followers they had on Instagram. She couldn't find Peter Cook or Freddie Ayer because they're all dead. They're both dead on Instagram. But she did find Adele. So anyway, speaking about money and metric and value, everything is in followers. Startup of the week. We've given the award to Facebook for their acquisition of Instagram as the greatest piece of business in digital history. Who's your startup of the week this week, Keith?
Well, this will be a shock. The startup of the week.
You always have shocks.
India.
At least it's not Microsoft. India, a whole country. More than a whole country, a whole subcontinent.
And not only that, a continent of startups, which is why they made my startup of the week. $17 billion invested in 2021 in startups. So that is a huge number and makes India really, really one of the three leaders in the world in terms of venture capital deployed. I think
wonderful country, wonderful people, wonderful food and culture. I have to admit, in these dark days of COVID where we still can't really travel, one of the places I really miss going, I've been there a few times, is India. I think when this pandemic goes away, India will be one of the first places I visit. So India is your startup of the week. And what about tweet of the week, Keith? Surely not Paul Graham again. We had him last week.
It is Paul Graham, but
my God.
But I really put it in because of Kim May Cutler, who is an ex-TechCrunch journalist.
We're all ex-TechCrunch journalists.
They were talking to each other about England, and the different conversational expectations of England versus Silicon Valley, which you and I are very familiar with. Paul makes the point, unexpectedly, that he learned from living in England that you have to have conversations with people, which he never had to do. In Silicon Valley, he could just talk shop.
What does that say about Paul Graham, that he didn't understand that people conversed with one another?
And Kim May agrees with him. I learned that you have to creatively banter for a long time with any new person before they'd have a direct conversation with you, especially about work. So the funny thing for you and me is that this is surprising, that human discourse is considered an unnecessary impediment to getting business done.
Is that but it's not just the UK, it's everywhere in the world. It's India, it's Africa, it's Italy, China. I mean, it's just the US, or particularly Silicon Valley, where people don't or can't talk to one another.
It's the difference between a bar and a whorehouse, isn't it?
Well, you tell me the difference. I don't know.
Transactional versus, spontaneous, let's call it.
You mean meeting someone?
Meeting and engaging. It's
I see.
How much will it cost versus what do you do for a living? Where do you live? Where do you?
But there are bars in Silicon Valley. They're not very good ones, but they exist.
No, but a bar is a place where you don't talk shop, right?
Right.
Well, American bars and English pubs are very different. Right?
How is transactional discourse going to change with money changing? With David Marcus's grand revolution?
Instead of handing over dollars, you get your smartphone out and deduct something from your wallet and put it into the other's wallet.
More transaction, more data, and it better be good data, right? At least.
Better be.
Well, that was the week for August the 27th, 2021.
A week
Manchester
when
United. Why don't you show the league table, Keith? Manchester United aren't doing so well. Only after 2 games, but they're what? Middle of the table?
We got 4 points. I think we're in the top. I think we're 5th.
You're not 5th.
I can't remember, but I think we are.
Find the table, because Spurs are 5th. They've already won 2 games.
Let's we can sort this out. We can.
The data, bad data, more bad data, Keith. Anyway, have a great week, everyone. We will be back. Hopefully, there'll be some real tech news next week.
Andrew, we are 6th. You are 5th. We are 6th.
I told you.
But it's early doors, as they say in England.
Definitely very, very early. Well, congratulations on Ronaldo. I'm not sure I'd want him at my club, but you're more than welcome.